So today I want to talk about lenses. Let's talk about prime lenses versus zoom lenses. So first and foremost, this is more of a overview of both lens sets, and this is really for beginners. So if you're an intermediate or an expert photographer, this video is not for you. Thank you for watching so far, but I would watch a different video. The topic of zoom lenses versus prime lenses is a big debate in the photography world, and it's a debate that's really quite silly in my opinion, because as I know for myself, I own both zoom lenses and prime lenses, and it really depends on what you're working with and what you're working on, and what, there is no one perfect lens. And if anyone tries to tell you one is better than the other, they're lying. They're not. Like, they are both great depending on what you're trying to get accomplished. So let's talk about what is a prime lens. A prime lens is something like this. These two lenses are fixed lenses, if you can see here. These are fixed lenses. They do not zoom. They don't have a zoom ring on them. They have like a focus ring like this one does here, but they have a fixed lens, and if you want to get closer or further away, you have to physically move. So this is a 60mm lens, this is a 25mm lens, and then on my Sony a7 II, this is my trusty 24mm lens. Again, if I want to get closer or further away with this lens, I have to zoom with my feet, as they like to say. A zoom lens is the opposite, and as the name says, it zooms. So this here is my 28 to 70mm zoom lens, and it zooms in and out. You can see here, it's zooming in and out. What's great about zoom lenses is that they typically will show you different markings that are on the lens here. Focus. So you have 28, 35, 50, and this one goes to 70. But zoom lenses can go from like an 18 to 300mm lens, depending on like APS-C, micro four thirds, whatever. But you have like a 100 to 300, 24 to 70. That's usually a lens that most people use. Right now I'm using the 12 to 60mm lens for micro four thirds. And again, they have their pros and cons. The way I like to think about zoom lenses are, they're a bunch of lenses within one lens body, right? So this one has a 28mm lens, 35mm lens, 50mm lens, and 70mm lens, all in one small, in this case, small compact body. Now, lenses can get really big, right? If you have a full frame 100 to 400mm lens, it's gonna be like this. You can get like a 200 to 600, which would be, even bigger. It'd be like this. So it really depends on what you're looking for. The real big difference between a prime lens and a zoom lens is the aperture. So it's the amount of light that is let into the camera, right? So the lower the number, so like a f1.2, 0.75, I've seen some of those before. Like, those are going to let in a large amount of light into the camera, but they're also going to give you a shallow depth of field. So the bokeh, or like that blurry background that you see in a lot of portraits or even wildlife photography, those are better achieved with a prime lens. Also, prime lenses are typically on our cell phone. So like an iPhone, Android phones, most of them, if not almost all of them, have a fixed lens. Even the iPhone 11 Pro, it has 3 cameras on there, but they're fixed at like 14, 26, I believe, don't quote me on it, and maybe like 52 or something like that, 56. So you have 3 different cameras within your phone, and they all have a different lens attached to them. I know of one Android phone, the OnePlus 7 Pro, has a true optical lens. So if you're zooming in, the lens is actually zooming like this. It doesn't zoom out or anything. It's like a periscope lens or something like that, but it does actually zoom. So typically, if you're like on an iPhone and you're zooming in, all you're really doing is just cropping in on your sensor. So instead of zooming in like that, I always tell people, just take the picture that you want to take normally and then just crop it in later. So typically when you're buying like an interchangeable lens camera, like this one here, the Panasonic G9 or the Sony a7 II, the lens that comes with the camera is typically a zoom lens. So it's the kit lens is a zoom lens, and that's a great lens to start with because you're getting, like in this case, I got a 28 to 70 millimeter lens, and if I didn't know much about photography or I'm just starting out, I don't know what focal length I like shooting at. So with this, you can play around with a bunch of different focal lengths. Like I always tell people, set your lens to like 50 millimeters and just walk around with a 50 millimeter focal length for a day or something like that. Or set it to 35 and do the same thing and see which one you like. You know, I've been playing with this 24 millimeter lens for a couple months now, and typically this is not a focal length that I would use for like everyday photography. It's more probably a 50 millimeter lens is what I would typically keep on my camera, but I'm enjoying this 24 millimeter lens. Now, zoom lenses, you can get lenses that have a lower aperture, like typically it's like f2.8. So that's like the Tamron 28 to 75, which is a really good lens for Sony cameras. I think they have them for other bodies too. But that's a really good lens because it's pretty cheap and it's like a 2.8 constant throughout the entire focal range. At the end of the day, one lens isn't better than another, in my opinion. Again, this is just all my opinion. I'm not here trying to debate people or, you know, say like I'm team prime, I'm team zoom. So before the whole coronavirus thing broke out, we were supposed to go on a trip overseas, and I was planning on purchasing the Tamron 28 to 75 millimeter lens, the f2.8, and just bring that on my Sony camera. For me, it would have been perfectly fine. F2.8 is pretty wide open, meaning that I can get good shots at low light and still have some really good depth of field for portraits and like group pictures, things like that. And then I would probably bring a 50 millimeter 1.7 lens and just have that in case the other lens, you know, it was just too dark and I couldn't get a good picture. I'd have that lens as a backup. So it's nice, having a zoom lens is nice because I don't have to carry around a bunch of prime lenses. On the flip side, having a really good prime lens is nice when you're in a lower light, like indoors, low light, and it's typically, I think of like Christmas Eve, those type of times where I want to get good pictures. A zoom lens isn't gonna quite do it, but a nice prime lens will do that. For the type of work that I do, and even the photography I take for myself, I don't need a big prime lens. I'm perfectly fine with the zoom lens. In fact, the next lens I hope to get for this, for my G9 here would be the 100 to 400 millimeter lens, and that is, I think, like an F. It starts at f4, f5.6, something like that. But that's more for wildlife photography. Where I'm not going to be able to get close to an eagle or a deer or bison or something like that. So hopefully this video will help shed some light on the differences between a prime lens and zoom lens, and really there is no perfect lens. Like, you're gonna go through lenses. If you're just starting out in photography, you will go through quite a bit of lenses before you find the focal length that you like. And once you find that, you can get a good lens and you can keep it forever, you know, as long as you stay with the same camera mount. Like, you can keep that lens forever. Like, the lenses, someone once told me, you don't marry the lenses. Someone once told me you marry the lenses and date the camera bodies, meaning your camera bodies are going to change over time, but your lenses will, you know, but your lenses will always be good. You can even take a lens from the 50s, and if you can get it to work with your camera, it will still shoot perfectly fine and very beautiful images. As always, thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful. I will see you next one. Talk to you later. Bye bye.